Hi, everyone. My name is Bridget Richardson. I'm the Assistant Director of Ecumenical and Pastoral Initiatives in the Nesti Center for Faith and Culture at University of St. Thomas in Houston. And welcome to part 2 of 3 conversations leading up to our Faithful Citizenship celebration on October 7th. And that's going to focus on family life in the United States. The third and final conversation will be at the end of September, and it will feature Dr. Joe and Cathy Garcia-Prats together. So let's lead right into this discussion. Let me first welcome Cathy Garcia-Prats. She's an author, speaker, mother of 10 sons, and she's our 2020 Nesti Center for Faith and Culture, Faithful Citizenship Honoree, along with her husband, Dr. Joe. So thank you, Cathy, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And then we have Max Linnville. He's newly married. Congrats. And he's the third of 5 children, and he's a campus minister at UST, University of St. Thomas, Houston. So thank you, Max.
No problem. Thank you.
And then we have Margaret Gaston, who I'm super excited to join us today. She's a senior nursing student at UST, University of St. Thomas, Houston, and she's the 6th of 8 children and is a peer minister in the Office of Campus Ministry at UST. So Margaret, welcome.
Thank you.
So today we're going to be talking about our title for the talk is Youth Culture in the U.S. Don't Believe the Lies. And when we talk about culture, culture is basically just a way of life that is made up of different symbols and institutions and methods that express that said way of life. So in the United States, we have a melting pot of a lot of diverse cultures. This group here is a representation of our diverse cultures that we're bringing to the table. So even in the US, even though it's made up of a lot of diverse cultures, we really do get consumed by this distinct American culture that has a lot to do with individualism. And in talking about the family, being separate or being an individual from your family is seen as being strong and what makes us stronger. And we know that our Catholic voice and our Catholic culture calls us to unity and togetherness and familial unity especially. So today we're going to talk about 3 lies that our American culture tells us. The first is, my parents don't understand me. I'm sure we've all said it before. I know I have. Sexuality is king. And then also, you're defined by what you do. So we're going to break open those 3 lies, and we'll start with, my parents don't understand me. So Margaret, you're a student. You probably have encountered this in your peers a lot, and a lot of students at UST are still living at home. So why don't you jump in and tell us what you think?
Thanks, Bridget. Yeah, I definitely think that this is a really good topic to talk about. I think that many students, and UST is not an exception, deal with this issue. And I think what really needs to be talked about is just the disconnect between parents and their children. And I think the reason for this is definitely yet another melting pot, or a perfect storm, you could say. I think it compiles a few facets. The first would probably be between the ages of 13 and really 21, teenagers and college students are still trying to find themselves, trying to find this role identity, you could say. Developmentally speaking, they're now aware of certain intangible principles like justice, dignity, compassion, love, relationship, friendship. So they're trying to discover all this and discover themselves. And when their parents try and help them, this can be seen as not a help or protection. It can be seen or interpreted as a suppression of sorts. Another aspect is, while they're trying to find this role identity, they're going to be more likely to take risks, and they're kind of in this modality of discovery. And this helps them really discover themselves, but also kind of increases that, misinterpretation of what their parents are wanting for them. And then if you want to throw another aspect in, the peer pressure. That's a huge part right now. At this stage developmentally, they have this drive. This also goes into college. They have this drive to fit in, to conform to their peers. And all this being said, you can have this, once like I said earlier, they have this idea of their ideals. And what usually happens is they are aware of these aspects about their life, and they see themselves, and they can be aware of this discrepancy in between, and that can be cause for tension. And another thing that they can do, which usually this is what my personal opinion would be, they see their parents, and then they see the discrepancy between their parents and these ideals. And so this is where this can stem this lack of respect for their parents, which is really, really unfortunate, because what usually happens is the teenagers don't understand that their parents really have been through what they've been through. Like, oh, my parents understand me. Like, no, like they really have. They've dated, they've gone through college, they've gone through high school. Like, they've had the struggles that you've had. They've been forced to understand and grapple with like reality just as you. And so it can give rise to just a lot of tension and a lot of kind of leaving the family unit, running away, trying to find their own identity, which again can cause a lot of tension. So I think honestly, the answer for it, I mean, obviously easier said than done, but I think open communication would be very vital. Like just understanding that the parents, I mean, Cathy, I know you can add to this, but like just that the parents are open to what's going on and want to have that open conversation. And another thing I think that I know some parents may not be happy with this answer, but I think that there's a little more of a lenience, just like not that the parents should like, not follow their principles or anything like that. But if the college students and high school students knew that their parents had this warm, welcoming, kind of forgiving aspect about them, that also would be a grounds for more communication. But yeah, that's what do you have to say about that, Cathy?
Yeah, I do agree. I agree. Yes, parents have to be open and forgiving. Understand that if we look back at our own lives, I'm sure we made missteps along the way that we had to deal with. And so understanding where they're coming from. I think there's a lot of things. I liked your there's peer pressure. And I like to tell adults, parents, we as parents still deal with peer pressure, and we often don't deal with it very well. I can look back at things that happened where other parents said, well, oh, everybody's going to that party. And I'm saying, so it's not in the best interest of your children to go to this party or to this activity. And some of them couldn't bear with their children not being part of this or being in the in crowd or some of those things. And so we as parents also have to stand up to the peer pressure and the culture pressure of, oh, I want my children to go to the Ivy League schools. They're not successful if they don't do certain things, instead of looking at experiences that are really in the best interest of your children. For example, colleges, finding a college that's a good fit for each of your children. Our sons went to 10 different universities, and people freak out. They go, "You're kidding me." And I said, no, but each one of them becomes an individual that needs to find their way. But at the same time, it's important for Joe and I to share with our boys how we feel about things so that they know where we're coming from. Whether it's, drinking in college, well, MIP, minor in possession. Well, Mom, you didn't drink in college. I said, drinking age was 18. It's 21 here. So what I did was legal. What you're doing is illegal. And, making sure they understand the implications of that choice that they're making in line with what our goals are. So just a little bit of an input on our part. And I think that whole respect issue, I think we have to respect each other and in our conversations, them sharing where they're coming from, where we're coming from. I like to tell people, if it's not illegal, immoral, unethical, sometimes you need to step back a little bit. Maybe it's okay for them to do some things that you might not have wanted to do or been a part of. But, again, be careful, how much of an interference you are, especially college kids. We are always their parent, but we're always parenting. And vice versa. You have to respect where we're.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with all that. And I think for my just experience in college, it's not so far long ago. It was about 5 years ago. So like I graduated, but I definitely I remember going through these stages in college. I went to Western Carolina and then I transferred and went really far from home. And I think one of the things that it really taught me was being so far from home in Indiana to just communicate with my family and the sense of independence where I was completely away, but in the same sense of I still wanted to communicate and keep my parents up to date with what was going on was really important to me, especially my parents, I was blessed that they were really open with me about talking about things and supportive, and they didn't push me a certain way to do anything that I didn't feel called to do. And but I think it really transferred in I think the sense of because you communicate with your parents and like you continue like your family, like building your family bonds, does not mean you can't be independent. Like you can still be your own self and do what God's calling you to do. And I think for me personally, like I ended up going to Jamaica. I've been to Uganda, Ecuador, Jamaica. I lived in Jamaica for a year doing missionary work, all these places. And it's like, that's a very independent thing. I did my own thing. I've traveled the world, and now I'm in Houston, Texas from North Carolina, but my parents supported me through it all. And it didn't make it where I wasn't or less independent. I was very independent, but my family really supported me. And I think it goes back to like that open communication, understanding like they're there for you, and they've been through a lot of these things and wanting to experience and go out and experience the world. And I think that's something that I really want to like take on from this is like that communication really is key. And I know it's hard sometimes. It's really hard, especially when you're nervous about what they're going to think. But in the end, your parents really do love you and want the best for you. And
Max, on another level too, because, you know, I know some of our sons would come home and they'd kind of share how their friends at school didn't want to go home. They didn't have that open communication. And I found with our sons, having a mentor sometimes outside the family is really an asset. I mean, as I went away, I was originally from New England, but went to in Northern Virginia, ended up going to New Orleans, sight unseen, to Loyola University. And so finding someone there that kind of understood the culture in New Orleans and some of the challenges, you know, again, drinking age was 18. How is that going to fit into my life? Am I going to go on binges like so many of the students did do, or am I going to understand where I'm coming from? But finding those mentors, and our sons did that. Sometimes it was a coach, sometimes it was a teacher, sometimes it was a colleague that they maybe were, or their boss that they were working with. And I didn't see that as competition like some people do, some parents do, but as an opportunity for them to be open with someone else, maybe not as comfortable sharing something with us, but being able to share it with that other adult, or in your situation, Margaret, where you're a peer mentor. I think those things are really important. The friends you have, my grandmother, my Italian grandma used to tell us, you know, Cathy, pick good friends, you know, and she's right. You know, your friends can make a real difference in what you choose to do and what you don't choose to do, and what importance you put on different aspects of your life.
I couldn't agree more with you, Cathy, definitely. Like, and on to what Max was saying about, and you, Cathy, about mentorship. Like, I think that having that foundation of a good relationship with your parent, your mother, your father, I think that like that also gives you not the freedom, but also like the tools you need to find other mentors that are closer or relate to how you had with your family. Like, for example, like when you said your sons don't have friends that love going home, like me as well. Like I've experienced that. Like my friends were like, "Oh, you talked to your mom about this?" Or like, "Yeah, like I ask my mom about everything, like probably more than she wants me to. Like I always ask her opinion on this. She's giving me the best advice, the best dating advice." And I think that is definitely just something that's unfortunately not seen a lot. And I think that something should be changed. That again, that communication and that realization that your parents have experienced what you're experiencing and they love you, and what the authority that they're exuding is not an act of suppression. It's a hope for protection against issues that they may have fought, or really just like a support,
And I think too, this independence issue just goes beyond so many issues. I mean, whether you're living at home or you are far away from home, you came to UST or wherever you went, primarily probably for your career choice, or music or some talent that you have a gift you have, but it goes beyond just when you get about your career. It's the other aspects of your life. What am I going to do physically? Am I just going to sit around and do nothing? Am I going to what are the other choices you're making in relationships? Am I just going to push that all as aren't important, or what choices am I going to make in those regards? Am I going to go and get, run every day, walk every day, work out? Am I going to attend church services? Am I not? Where is all of this fitting into your life? And then it goes into the whole sexuality and relationships at school. You know, what kind of choices am I going to make with my sexuality? I was an RA at Loyola and had freshmen most years. And so I would always say at the beginning of the year, you have to know what you want in those areas. What are you going to do? Are you, regards to drinking, to drugs, to sexuality, other relationships? What kind of commitment are you going to make to your studies? All of those things. You have to know, get into a situation, how you're going to deal with them. Because otherwise you go in and you're just kind of lost. You don't know really where you're going. And so you can't get there. If you don't have a goal and you know where you are, it's hard to get there because you aren't going to make choices that allow you to get there.
Yeah, and that brings us to our next lie: sexuality is king. So Max, you want to talk about that and how the culture thinks about sexuality and identity?
Yeah, I think with sexuality, I remember when I was going through undergrad, we'd always be like, okay, what do you see as like, what is beauty and what is all these things? And we talk about these topics and you would see like, oh, it's this, and it'd be like this girl on a billboard with like really tight clothes and like all this stuff, and you'd be like, oh, that's beauty. And and then like you see movies and TV shows now, and it's all wrapped around this really key of like this, the more sexual are, the more beautiful, and all these things. I think it's a distorted view that's really been like passed through culture, and I think it's very easy and wrapped up, especially in the college experience, of this like the way you're cool is by having sex or and doing these things, and that's what makes you like the cool person on campus, and that's the best way to have relationships and get to know each other. And one of the things though that I think is really dangerous about that though is that like you get so wrapped up about all these things and then you lose a sense of like, okay, what am I being called to do, or who am I really truly who's God calling me to be? And I think that's the thing that it goes back to like our core of understanding our faith is like we all have this innate human dignity. We're all made in the image and likeness of God, and for us to be made in that image and likeness means that Christ has something more for us, because sexuality is not what describes who we are. I think it's so easy to be like, I'm the guy that has sex here, I'm gay, or I'm this and that. And I think all these topics is like we define ourselves a lot of times by our sexuality, and it's like why are we stopping there? Like, dude, God has so much more for us and wants us to describe ourselves with so much more than just sexuality. So how do we break that down and start with something a little bit deeper of who is Christ calling me to be? And if I'm made in the image and likeness of God, what does that mean for me personally? And I think and that's like something for each one of us to discover in time. But I think it goes to vocation, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later. But I think there's all these temptations, especially in college though, to just get wrapped up in that with like pornography and all these things. And I think that's obviously like not true. If you do something that makes you feel guilty afterwards, probably is not going to be something that's true and for the image of God that God's wanting you to be. And but I think it really like takes some time though to reflect on like, who do you understand yourself as? And I know Cathy's going to go into this understanding like body image and the perceptions of what society talks about. And I think this is a good first step to start understanding who we are truly called to be in Christ. And it's not wrapped up in this sexuality that I think is so easily given by society and our culture. So Cathy, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
I think, there's sex and kind of more the physical kind of attributes of that. And then there's kind of the sexuality kind of issue where Joe's a man and how we deal with it. Now, I grew up in a family of all girls, and God blessed us with 10 sons. And there's differences. I mean, Joe and I we picked that up pretty early on. Different needs, different experiences, how we actually saw sexuality. And so looking at just the kind of physical attributes, growing up in a family of girls, I understood, if you are more buxom, or you have this, and you have certain kind of hair and complexion, all those things were important. But I didn't realize even with men, young men, there's also those qualities that we're often judged by. We tend to be smaller people. I'm petite. My husband is not man of big stature, not physically. And I always tease people, so if I gave Joe 6 more inches and, 20 more pounds and rippling muscles, it's not going to make him a better husband, a better father, a better physician, a better friend. And if we put all our emphasis on that, you're going to lose out on who maybe that real person is. And if you get to know Joe, there's so much more to him than that physical side. And our sons had to deal with that, sometimes with coaches who looked at them and they're small in stature instead of looking at the skills they had, or, looking at yet a young woman who may be very attractive, but forgetting that she has an intellectual side and a creative side. And we lose all of that if we focus just on those physical attributes that we have. And so, with our, we have 10 sons. Some of them are a little bit taller, some of them a little shorter, creative. And so for Joe and I, it was looking at their individual gifts and who they were, whether it was their different types of personalities, their creativity, their intellectual ability, their athletic ability, and appreciating each of them for who they were. But then that lets the other appreciate each other. So the boys could look at each other and not be, oh gosh, he's taller than I am, or oh my gosh, he makes better grades than I do. Oh gosh, he won the award in, athletics or something, And so for each of us to look at the individuals we are and respect that, and who we are beyond just that sexual act. I think we get lost in that if we jump to that and don't know the other person.
Yeah, and a lot of that, it seems, has to do with that personal development of self. And I know, Margaret, you're going to touch a little bit on that personal development.
Yeah, definitely. I also wanted to just add on to what Cathy said about that image, because I think that definitely plays into at least the girl's perspective of that personal development. Like, you can see it in our culture. We're not fed to, learn more about like our careers or our enjoyments or our talents, especially as women. Like, it's definitely way more heavily on how we look, how much we weigh, what's our waistline like measurement, like for example, like in 2019, almost $50 billion in the US was spent just on the cosmetic industry. Obviously that does not show a satisfaction in who I am just as I am, and not even talking about like the plastic surgery in the US that is like, it's just skyrocketed. All that shows that just as a culture, like especially I can speak for like just the woman's side of it, we're definitely focusing more on that external instead of the internal, which is really so unfortunate. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Unfortunately, you can say like, oh, this is what kids my generation thinks about, but I think that there's definitely an underlying issue there. I think that sexuality and sex is sex is definitely something that's accepted and expected, which is definitely a two-edged sword. It makes it that much harder for a young girl going through high school and college. We're fed that it's like I said earlier, like we're developmentally, we're trying to conform to our peers. And so if our peers are only expecting and accepting a sexual relationship with your, like if I'm teased if I don't have it, if I'm thought of as less beautiful if I don't have it, I'm going to move heaven and earth to try and be accepted to do that. I think again with that personal development, I think that we lose, like women definitely, we lose that growth and supplant it with the working out and the how I look and the clothes, but that's what we're fed. If you look at 17 magazine, Gossip magazine, the whole from cover to cover, it's sexual tips, masturbation tips, how to look better at night, like, oh, we're just fed that, so that's all we know. And if we're not having that communication with our moms or our dads, how are we going to know anything else? Just so interesting how like all of our topics are so interconnected. And then another lie I think that could fall under the sexuality is king part is I think many women think that sex is exemplified by, love can be seen through sex, that if we have sex, we're in love, we're moving forward, our relationship is more. I think that's really what women want, of course. There's this one quote, I don't know who said it, but it's that men use love to get sex and women use sex to get love. And I think that is, it really does. I'm not saying all men or all women. I'm just saying that as a general rule in today's culture, in the high school scene, in the college scene, I think that it's very common. I think women think that sex is very transactional. And I have tons of friends who will say, like, oh, he bought me dinner. I should give it to him. Like, oh, he bought my senior banquet ticket. Like, that's what's expected. If I don't give it to him, I don't care about him, or I'm not a good girlfriend. And which is just so unfortunate, because that's the sexual activity is, I feel like, the defining point of whether or not I'm beautiful, I'm empowered, I'm a good girlfriend, I'm doing what's right in the world. Which again, I think that's what we talked about, like how sexuality is king. I think that those are definitely some of the underlying reasons,
and the lie,
underneath that. The lie,
and the big
absolutely.
another lie.
Absolutely.
You know, you will do this if you love me. You know, and parents do that too. I mean, you know, if you love me, you would do this. If you don't do that, and we experience that. I mean, you know, there were times when Joe's parents would say, "Oh, if you love me, you would do that," and or you would do this, and nothing to do with love. You know, it was a choice needed to make for us, and not them. So it is a lie. I think that's a true lie, that we experience in our society. That's why I think it goes back to what Max, you were saying, and we were saying, you know, just where fit into your life long term. What kind of a relationship do you want long term? Because when we get to college, we are at a different level. We are more mature, hopefully. And but you know, do you want to be having sex with this guy, and then you have him in class the next day? And there's been 2 other guys in there that it just, to me, I can't picture it. I can't imagine it. But what does that do to you and your own self-respect? I just don't think you're seeing yourself long term. And sexually transmitted diseases have not gone away. And you know, are you prepared to share that with the future partner? You know what, I have this, and or this, or whatever. And you know, God is forgiving, but nature isn't. And so, you know, are you going to be able to deal with an unexpected pregnancy? You know, where's that going to, male or female? You know, how are you going to deal with this issue that leads to then other choices? So it really goes back to, God gave us a free will, and we make choices, and we have to use them wisely in all areas of our life.
No, and Cathy, I couldn't agree more, because like, definitely I think that our culture, they tell us the now, and how to be happy now, and all the details of how now. There's not a lot of, you know, long-term thinking, or even the side effects of, like, even just like you said, the unwanted pregnancy, the, you know, STIs, or like, or even just how it opens up both parties to, you know, hurt and regret. The rumors that it can spread. I think many women think that once they've moved on to that sex part, that that he's the one, and then all you need, like you said, you have a fallout at school the next day, and then you're not dating anymore, and then you regret like giving that special part of yourself. So then I think this is what opens the door to the worst part of this whole scenario, is where the women feel like they can't stop, that that now that they've done it, I'm not saving myself for anyone else now I just keep on going. And obviously it can become addicting. It's easy to keep going, it's hard to stop, and like, it's definitely just kind of, you just kind of get stuck in this rut. Definitely think that if these people, if in the college world and high school world, if we were, instead of showing them in 17 magazine like all the fun parts and all the tips and tricks, we were telling them, like, not like Johnny Raincoat, but yes, like, this is what you need to realize. Like, do you have enough money to, will your parents accept this baby? Would you have enough money to get a test? Do you have the means? Like, are, like, is this what you want? Because I mean, there's some teen pregnancies and they get married, and they're, you know, they stay married and they raise children. Like, it has, obviously not all problems and badly, you know, they can have good endings. But I think that that's another thing that our culture doesn't teach, like, at least young women or young men, that like, there are, you know, adverse effects to our actions. And that's just the girl's point of view. What do you think, Max, on like the man's perspective of sexuality, like in the college world?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just remember being a college baseball player. Like, it was very wrapped up around this, and it was very hard to like break out of that whole, like, even with all your friends, like, this is the culture that you're just being surrounded by. And I think, but I don't think it just stays within sports. I think it goes outside of that. And I think it's this competitive nature between men, that the like world has to like portray all the time too. That's wrapped up of like, you're the most manly by lifting the most weight, or doing this and that. I think that's also something that kind of like ties into this whole issue. And I think that was something Cathy was talking about. I was like, men experience this too, but ours becomes a very like very complex. And I think also just the way we, like, I just know movies, like, I just always remember movies. Like, when you watch a movie, it's always kind of like oh, this is the way it is. And I think that's so easily influenced in our culture, because you see really famous people on movies and doing this, and you're like, okay, this is like obviously what like it has to be. And I feel like people are more influenced by people that they look up to, movie stars, famous people, than we realize. And I think to be aware, like, okay, this person's this reality in this movie isn't true. It's false, is really important, especially in moving past this whole issue of sexuality, to go into these topics that y'all are talking about really deeply, of us like it's something deeper, and it has more meaning than just this transactional, it's over with kind of, and there's a lot of implications that can happen. I think in our culture too, it's very easy for the men to be like, oh, it's not my problem, I'll just walk away. And I think that's also something that's been,
and I saw a little change too. I go back decades here, but I do think, when contraception came into play, I think it did change some of the mentality, that then there was, from the male perspective anyway, well, she doesn't have to get pregnant. She can take care of that. And of course, the pressure came on the woman to take care of some of this. And so there was a little bit of a different mentality. The expectation of a relationship kind of changed a little bit. And so, but I do think, going back with the media, the whole media type thing, if you look at how some of these shows came into being and the impact they have on the mentality, like you said, it just became normal. It's okay to do this. It's okay to, to have sex with this person or sleep with this person, do whatever. And, our philosophy, Joe and I, we always say garbage in, garbage out. But we as adults, as children, we become desensitized to what's right when we're constantly bombarded by what's wrong. In a home, if you're using foul language all the time and every other word out of your mouth is this, your kids are going to pick that up. And so don't be surprised they go to school and call someone or a teacher by a certain name, because that's what they've heard. A 4-year-old doesn't go and call a teacher something if they hadn't heard that before. And so we as parents have a real impact on that. What we watch, what we read, what are you reading? What kind of influence are the books you're reading have on you? I was amazed when that book, I think was called Shades of Grey, came out, and it went bonkers, mostly by women. And I was just appalled. And yet I had a daughter-in-law who was in a book club, and they were getting ready to read that. And she called me, and she ended up getting totally out of the book club. They obviously were not where she wanted to be, did not need that in her life. And so I think we have to be careful, what we're watching, what we accept. As you said, is it real or not real? And in most cases, with the media, there's not a whole lot of real.
Yeah, and I think this brings us to the third piece, where it's like, okay, these are all the things in the culture. This is everything that's happening. It's pretty heavy. And there's a lot going on, but there's the silver lining in all of this is that there's forgiveness, mercy, vocation. There's, for us, our faith, there's campus ministers at UST and most colleges and universities. So Max, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about vocation and how you pick yourself up after, being bombarded in so many different ways by what the culture is telling you.
Is it Max?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the third lie.
Like,
you're not defined by what you do, right?
Talk about, especially as a campus. Yeah. Sorry, my connection's a little spotty right now, so I don't know if it's my internet that's running slow or not. But yeah. So I think with this topic, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, is just vocation, especially as a campus minister. Part of being a campus minister is like helping students figure out where they're being called to serve and how they're being called to serve in the world. And I think a lot of times when we think of vocation, it's very easy to just be like, I'm going to get a business degree. I'm going to do this or that. And this is what my vocation is. But is that truly what vocation is? And Nicole always says this line is, our vocation is our gifts serving the need of the world, and it brings us happiness. So I think to look at it that way, I think is really important, especially with this really heavy topic of this, like, okay, all these bad things are going on. So what can there be more of? And, but there is something more. We have this vocation, this deep calling to go out into the world and use our gifts, our talents, because just because you struggle with sexuality or sex doesn't mean you don't have these gifts that are what define you and what actually defines you and God is calling you to use. And I'll share just my vocation story. I remember going through college, I met this guy in high school and he served and did clean water projects. I was like, oh, this is really cool. I want to do that. And then I ended up going to college playing baseball. And that was really what defined me. All this, like, baseball was my thing. And I just realized there was something more that I was always desiring through everything that I was going through, even as a baseball player. And I ended up going to Uganda after, and I converted over to Catholicism. Then I went to Uganda and started serving there. And then when I was serving, I just found myself really like working with a lot of young adults when we were in Uganda. And then I came back to school and I was like, oh, that was really cool. I want to keep doing this. So I served at the young adults juvenile justice center in South Bend. And I served there and just found myself really enjoying that and finding God, like really letting me connect with young adults that were in the juvenile justice center there. So after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to do a year of service. And I went out and went to Jamaica. And when I was in Jamaica, I found myself serving with young adults a lot too. And just like this innate, or this happiness that really was coming over me. And this is how I ended up being a campus minister. I was like, God's using my gifts and talents to work with young adults. And it's like, this is where God's calling me. So I went through and got my master's and ended up here. But I think what it really came down to, though, with the sense of vocation, I think a lot of times in our world, it's like you pick it, you choose it. That's what it is, your business degree. But you have to go out and serve. You have to go out and experience it, because without serving and going out into the world and seeing how your gifts and talents are used, you're not going to know how you're actually being called to do what God's calling you to do in the world. So maybe you're getting a business degree. I have a business degree and I'm not using it because I was already like halfway through my undergrad before I figured out that's not where I was being called. But so maybe you think you're called to have a business degree. So maybe you should go out and serve in a capacity, help people that experience poverty figure out how to get their businesses up and running. And if you're like, okay, this is a gift that God's calling me to and God's using me for, then maybe you are called to that. Or maybe if you're a nurse and you really find joy or think you're going to find joy out serving, go out and serve. Luckily, like clinicals is a great like example. Like you go and experience it first to like see if this is where you're feeling called and everything. But there has to be this sense of like going out and serving in the world to figure out where you're being called. But inside of all that though, so where you're going and finding these gifts, finding how you're being called to serve the world and finding this vocation, there's going to be this struggle with all these things. You're going to fail a few times. And like, so with sexuality, like just because you're trying to move past this and because you're wanting to live out this vocation that you feel called to, doesn't mean you're not going to struggle with other things going on. But just because you mess up does not mean you should give up on this vocation or the things that you're struggling with. And I remember this priest always telling me when I was in Cleveland, Ohio, I would go to confession, and he'd be like, the worst thing that you can do is give up hope. Because once you give up hope, then the world can, like the world can really take over your whole understanding of how you're being called. And he's like, so don't ever give up hope, because once you give up hope, then there's really nothing that we can do. And like that hope keeps us alive. And that hope is the hope of the resurrection. And I think that's like all tied in. We have to have this hope, because if without hope, then like there's nothing that we can really do. And it goes with love and all these things. And I think Margaret is going to talk a little bit more about this like mercy and this forgiveness that we can experience. But I think like don't ever give up hope, even with these things when you're struggling and you're like trying to live out this vocation, or you're trying to stop with the sex or anything like that. Like just because you fail, don't let that let you give up hope on what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I could obviously agree more about that. I think that is the worst thing you can possibly do, is once if you've already given in to those temptations or given into the whims of the culture, or you've been entangled in it, the worst thing you can do is not in getting involved in it, getting caught up in it, is just giving up hope after just giving up in general. And I think that is just such a message from the Catholic Church, especially, and obviously the Christian, general Christian Church, but there is mercy, like there is forgiveness. Like I have so many friends who all be like, I'll come with me. And I'm like, oh, no. Like, do you know the things I do? Like, no, there's no way, like, not for me. And like, no, like I think that maybe unfortunately is a representation that from my experience, the Catholic Church kind of represents of this just kind of hard, like you have to follow these laws, you have to follow these commandments, which of course they're meant to set us free, but they can come off as I'm not loved, I'm not worthy unless I do X, Y, and Z, which is not true, because that's why we have the sacrament of confession. That's why it's so beautiful that no, go back. Like just because you've gotten in this rut, there's always mercy. There's like our God, we have a loving God. He is of course like a just God, but he's a loving God. And I think that many of us don't understand like just the power of new habits. Like if you have toxic relationships, toxic friends, do your best. Say you're trying to study. Say you have other things. Like try and get out of those toxic relationships. Try and get away from those toxic people. If sports is a way for that, try it and go to your practices, but try not to hang out with them afterwards. If you find that they're calling, like leading you into something, and don't feel like I think that the worst thing to can happen is like come this time of conversation, like someone might be listening and say like, oh, I do this. Like, oh, guess I'm done with, like I'm done for, there's no hope for me. But no, like just because now don't feel deflated. Like now that you've found or heard things in this conversation that like may be incriminating to you. But no, like they're just because now you're made aware. The first step of solving a problem is, acknowledging that there is a problem, so we've come that first step. And now what's left to do is to just move forward, of, like I said, avoid those toxic environments. Those, like as Catholics, we call them occasions of sin, like go back to God. There's always open arms. There's always mercy, come to campus ministry. Like Max and I are going to be there. Like we're always welcoming. We're always welcoming. We're always loving. We want you to be happy. We want you, like Max is literally the best at helping others find vocation. He's helped me. I think that the worst thing is giving up hope and thinking that the door's closed. The door's always open.
And remember, God gives us a new day every day. And so,
amen.
And as a mom, sometimes when, you had one of those really tough days, and I had them, when you have 10 boys, there are issues that go on. Joe's hours for many years were very challenging. And so at the end of the day, when you kind of reflect on your day, there are many times, how could I do that differently? So the next time this happens, I can handle it differently. And that helps. It helps a whole lot. But also, to kind of address Max a little bit, I think it's very important to be open to change within your vocation. My dream was to be a teacher, and I started I was a first grade teacher, loved it, worked hard to get to that point. But when it came time to make a decision, am I going to work outside the home? Am I going to work in the home? I chose to stay home. I was criticized tremendously over the years. And I could see very quickly when I was in a group, what do you do? Well, I'm home with the children. I taught school, but now I'm home with the kids. My level of intelligence went from here to here. And as I got involved in the volunteer world and things, it went up a little bit. But I had to be comfortable with those choices. I had to be comfortable with our decision to have a large family. That's countercultural. Joe's a physician, and yet we drive very simple cars. We made choices. Are we going to buy a fancy car? Oh, we may not be able to pay that tuition for these kids to go through school. You make choices along the way. Am I going to buy designer clothes? And then, we can't do this. And so we had to decide. God will help us. God will be with us, but we have to do our part. And our part was to make choices that are in the best interest of each other. Love is about choosing to make choices that help the other person to be a better person. With your children, if you have them, what choices are we making that are in the best interest of each other? That's what love is about. Self-love. What choices am I making that are in my best interest? Is having sex, or is cheating on this test, or is, going to the bars right now when we're being told that's not really in the best interest of our community. Those are all choices we have to make. And And so I feel very fortunate. I mean, I went from being a first grade teacher to a mom to, oh my gosh, you have 10 kids, you need to share your story, to writing books, to being on national TV shows, to giving talks. It's one of the shyest people in the classroom, to giving talks to multiple levels of people. And so being open to what God may want in your life, and that may change, just like it did for Max and his career choice, or how you may use your nursing skills down the road. It's been fun for us to see our sons and the skills they have and how they use them, and to let them know that you make an impact, if you want, in any career you have. If you're in business, how do you treat other people? Are you honest? Are you forthright? As a coach, how are you showing them the example that you want for them? Can they trust in you? Can they turn to you? All of those, teaching, whatever you have, you can God's will.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it all together. And as we finish up on vocation and talk, I know Margaret mentioned that Max was so integral in her discerning her vocation. So if someone is confused or they just heard this and they're having whiplash, how can they come to campus ministry, you and Margaret, Max? How can they talk to you guys about all of this stuff?
Yeah. So right now things are a little different with everything being online, but like if you want to get involved, there's going to be the peer ministers. So we have 8 of them this year. They're going to be running small groups. So Margaret will be running one of them. So if you're like, oh, I want to go to Margaret, so you just reach out to her. But you can email us on our email. It's all on the school website. I'm not going to say it here just because it's kind of weird to say it here, but but you can email us. But there's also, like, especially once we get back onto campus, we have all these retreats that you can get involved in, which is a great way to just kind of build in community. And then we have service opportunities. You can go out to when school's back in session, we go out and serve at the Angela House, which is a home for women that have experienced incarceration. We go and eat a meal with them and just build community and just serve that way. And I think it's a great way and to just like start to get out there and serve and figure out if this is how your gifts and talents are being used. And then also we have coffee and donuts on Wednesdays. So great place to come and get some free coffee and donuts and just start to like know people. And we got praise and worship nights and the mass and and all the sacraments, like Margaret was saying, like, there's a lot of things going on. So all you really got to do is just reach out to us. And we'll be reaching out to you also. We're going to be really present on campus this year. So even if you don't want to be reached out to, we're going to reach out to you. So yeah, don't worry about that. But yeah, just get involved. And and everyone's welcome. You don't have to be Catholic. Anyone on any faith journey, any walk of life, we really want you involved. So don't feel like you're not worthy or you can't be involved with us, because everyone can be. You all have a place in campus ministry. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Cathy, Max, Margaret, for that wonderful conversation. That was so cool to witness and be a part of. And Margaret provided us with a ton of links and suggestions and books. So I'm going to link all of those in the description. And I'll also link Cathy's website, which is full of all the books that she's written. And so, the message here, don't believe the lies, communicate with your parents, go to your peer mentors who care so much about you, and know that God is loving. The church is always open, and prayer is always available if you're struggling. So thank you everyone for listening. There's going to be a link to register for our Faithful Citizenship celebration on October 7th so that you can meet Cathy and Dr. Joe in person. But again, thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you.
Max and Margaret.
Thank you.